The raid at dusk. The wheels of the wagon groaned against the hard-packed earth, each turn marking another mile deeper into territory that didn't belong to them. Sarah Whitman pressed her palm against the wooden slat, feeling the splinters bite into her skin. Through the canvas opening, she watched the sun bleeding orange across the horizon, painting the desert in shades of fire and shadow. "We'll make camp soon," her father called from the driver's seat. His voice carried that forced cheerfulness he'd worn like armor since they'd left Missouri 3 months back. Mother sat beside him, her bonnet pulled low against the dust, hands folded in her lap the way they always were during evening prayers. Sarah's younger brother Thomas kicked at the flour sacks opposite her. At 12, he thought himself ready for anything the frontier might throw at them. Sarah knew better. At 19, she'd heard enough stories from the wagon trains they'd passed, seen enough crosses marking graves along the trail. The convoy consisted of 6 wagons, 23 souls in total, all bound for California's promise of new beginnings. The Hendersons with their 3 small children, old Samuel Crawford and his nephew, the newlywed Millers, who still looked at each other like the world was made of nothing but sunshine and possibilities. "Sarah, help your mother with supper," Father said as the wagons began their familiar evening circle. She climbed down, her boots hitting the ground with a soft thud that seemed too loud in the growing quiet. Something felt different tonight. The very air seemed to hold its breath. She'd barely gotten the cook fire started when she heard it, a sound like distant thunder, but wrong somehow. The men heard it too. She saw her father's hand move to his rifle, saw Mr. Henderson stand up straight from unhitching his oxen. Then they came. The Apache warriors appeared like demons born from the dying light, their war cries splitting the air. Arrows whistled through the dusk before anyone could properly react. "Mrs. Miller screamed. Sarah saw her fall, clutching her shoulder where an arrow bloomed like a terrible flower. "Get down! Get under the wagons!" Father's voice barely cut through the chaos. Gunfire erupted from both sides. Sarah dropped behind a water barrel, her mother pulling Thomas down beside her. The acrid smell of gunpowder mixed with dust and fear. She watched her father take aim, fire reload with hands that had plowed fields and built their home back in Missouri. Hands that had held her when she was small and afraid of thunderstorms. An arrow caught him in the chest, and he staggered back, his rifle falling from his grasp. "Father!" The word tore from her throat, but her mother's arms held her back, held her down as the world exploded into violence and flame. The Apache warriors moved like smoke through their defenses. Sarah glimpsed painted faces, feathers dark against the burning sky. One of the wagons caught fire, the Hendersons, and she could hear the children crying somewhere in the smoke. Then she saw him. He sat atop a painted horse at the edge of the battle, watching with eyes that seemed to see everything at once. Unlike the others, he wore no war paint, just simple buckskin and a single eagle feather in his long black hair. Even in the chaos, there was something different about him, a stillness, an authority that marked him as their leader. Their eyes met across the battlefield. For one impossible moment, the world narrowed to just that look. Sarah couldn't breathe, couldn't move. His face was all sharp angles and shadow, neither young nor old, marked by sun and wind and something else she couldn't name. A hand grabbed her arm, her mother pulling her toward the burning wagons. "We have to run! Sarah, we have to—" The shot came from somewhere to their left. Her mother's grip loosened, and she crumpled to the ground with a soft sigh, as if she were simply tired. Thomas screamed, throwing himself over their mother's still form. "No, no, no!" Sarah dropped beside them, her hands shaking as she tried to stem the blood. But there was too much, and her mother's eyes were already going dim. "Take care of your brother," her mother whispered, blood bubbling at her lips. "Be strong, my sweet girl, be—" The words died unfinished. Sarah felt something inside her break, sharp and clean as winter ice. Thomas sobbed against her shoulder, and she held him tight, trying to shield him from the horror surrounding them. The gunfire was dying now, Too many of their men had fallen. She could see Mr. Henderson face down in the dirt. Could hear old Samuel Crawford calling for his nephew, who would never answer again. Footsteps approached. Slow. Deliberate. Sarah looked up to find the Apache leader standing over them, his warriors flanking him on either side. Up close, she could see the scar that ran along his jaw, the deep lines around his eyes that spoke of hard years and harder choices. He said something in his language to the man beside him, who nodded and reached for Thomas. Sarah's arms tightened around her brother. "No," she said, surprising herself with the steadiness of her voice. "Please, he's just a boy." The leader studied her for a long moment. Then he spoke, and though she couldn't understand the words, his meaning was clear in the gesture he made. The warrior stepped back. More words in that strange tongue. 2 warriors grabbed her arms, pulling her to her feet. Thomas clung to her skirt, but they pushed him away, not roughly but firmly. She watched as other women from the convoy were similarly taken young women. She realized with growing dread, Mrs. Miller, despite her wounded shoulder, the 2 daughters of the Henderson family, barely older than children themselves. "Sarah!" Thomas reached for her, but one of the warriors held him back. At a word from their leader, they didn't hurt him, just kept him with the other survivors, the few men too old or too young to be threats, the children, the wounded who might yet live. The leader mounted his horse in one fluid motion, then looked down at her. He said something, a single word that might have been a name or a command. When she didn't respond, he simply nodded to his men. They bound her hands, not cruelly but securely, and lifted her onto a horse behind one of the warriors. As they prepared to leave, she turned for one last look at the devastation of her former life. Thomas stood among the ruins, tears cutting tracks through the dust on his face. Their parents' bodies lay still in the fading light. Everything they'd carried across half a continent, hope, dreams. The quilts her grandmother had made, her father's books, her mother's china scattered and burning. The Apache leader raised his hand, and the war party moved out into the gathering darkness. Sarah closed her eyes, trying to hold on to the image of her brother's face, knowing she might never see him again. The horse's hooves beat a steady rhythm against the earth, carrying her away from everything she'd known and toward a fate she couldn't imagine. She thought of her mother's last words, "Be strong," and wondered if strength would be enough for whatever lay ahead. Behind them, the burning wagon sent smoke signals into the star-filled sky, marking the end of one life and the beginning of another she never could have imagined when she'd awakened that morning to her mother's gentle humming and the promise of California gold. The Apache rode through the night, and Sarah rode with them, a captive carried into the vast darkness of the frontier, where different laws governed and different gods held sway. The only certainty was the solid presence of the horse beneath her, and the stranger thought that the Apache leader, for reasons she couldn't fathom, had chosen to spare her life. The moon rose full and bright, casting silver light across the desert landscape, and still they rode on, deeper into Apache territory, deeper into the unknown. The captive in the valley. Sarah woke to unfamiliar sounds, the soft nickering of horses, voices speaking in that fluid language she couldn't understand, the snap of wood in a fire. For a moment, she forgot where she was, reaching for the familiar comfort of her mother's quilt. Her fingers found only hard-packed earth and the rough blanket someone had thrown over her during the night. Memory crashed back like a physical blow. The raid, her parents' bodies in the dust, Thomas's tear-stained face growing smaller as they rode away. She bit down on her knuckle to keep from crying out, tasting dirt and her own fear. The Apache camp spread across a hidden valley, sheltered by red rock walls that rose like ancient sentinels against the sky. Perhaps 40 or 50 dwellings. Not the teepees she'd expected from the dime novels back east, but dome-shaped structures made of bent branches and brush. Smoke rose from morning fires, and she could smell something cooking that made her stomach clench with hunger despite everything. She sat up slowly, aware of eyes upon her. The other captive women huddled nearby. Mrs. Miller cradling her bandaged shoulder. The Henderson girls clinging to each other. They all looked to Sarah, perhaps because she was oldest among them. Perhaps because she'd been the one to speak up during the raid. "Are you hurt?" she whispered to Mrs. Miller. "It's not deep," the woman replied, though her face was pale with pain. "Sarah, what will happen to us?" Before Sarah could admit she didn't know, movement caught her eye. The Apache leader emerged from one of the larger dwellings, speaking with an older man whose hair was streaked with gray. Even from across the camp, she could feel the weight of his presence, the way others moved with respect around him. He looked in their direction, and their eyes met briefly before Sarah forced herself to look away. She focused instead on the activity around them: women tending fires, children playing with stick hoops, men caring for weapons and horses. It seemed impossibly normal, this domestic scene, when her own world had ended in blood and flame just hours ago. A woman approached them, older than Sarah's mother would ever be now, with silver threading through her black hair. She carried a water gourd and strips of dried meat. When she offered them, Sarah hesitated, but hunger won. The meat was tough, seasoned with something unfamiliar, but it was food. "Thank you," Sarah said, not knowing if the woman understood. The Apache woman studied her with dark, intelligent eyes, then spoke in accented but clear English. "You eat, grow strong, much work to do." Surprise must have shown on Sarah's face because the woman's mouth quirked in what might have been amusement. "Many seasons I lived at the mission school, before I came home." She gestured around the camp. "This is home. You learn or you die. Simple." With that cheerful pronouncement, she moved on to distribute food to the others. Sarah chewed slowly, processing this information. At least someone here spoke English. That was something. The day passed in a blur of strangeness. They were given tasks: gathering wood, grinding corn, hauling water from the stream that ran through the valley. Sarah's hands, soft from her life in Missouri, quickly developed blisters from the unfamiliar work. But she didn't complain. She watched everything, trying to understand the rhythms of this new world. The Apache women worked alongside them, some curious, others openly hostile. One young woman, perhaps Sarah's own age, made a point of bumping into her at the stream, sending her sprawling into the shallow water. The other Apache women laughed, and Sarah pulled herself up, soaked and humiliated but determined not to show weakness. "Pale women are weak," the young woman said in broken English. "You not last long here." Sarah wrung out her skirts without responding. Though anger burned hot in her chest, she thought of her mother's quiet strength, her father's steady hands, and lifted her chin. She would survive this. She had to. As the sun reached its peak, she noticed the leader watching her from where he sat with other men, working on what looked like arrow shafts. His expression gave nothing away, but she felt his gaze like a physical touch. Each time she looked up, he was there, observing her struggles with the same intensity he'd shown during the raid. Late afternoon brought an unexpected respite. The older woman who'd brought them food, Sarah had heard others call her Nantan's mother, though she didn't know what Nantan meant, gestured for her to follow. Wary but curious, Sarah obeyed. The woman led her to a smaller dwelling set slightly apart from the others. Inside, herbs hung from the curved ceiling, filling the space with a sharp, clean scent. The woman handed her a small pot of something that looked like paste. "For hands," she said, mimicking rubbing palms together. "White women hands too soft. This help makes strong." Sarah applied the salve, wincing as it stung her blisters before soothing them. "Why are you helping me?" The woman was quiet for a long moment, grinding something in a stone bowl. "My son, he sees something in you. I don't know what, but he is chief now. Since his father crossed a spirit world, what he sees matters." "Chief," So the leader who'd spared her was more than just a war party leader. Sarah filed this information away, along with the revelation that this was his mother. "Your son," Sarah said carefully. "What is his name?" "His war name is Nightwind, his child name." She smiled slightly. "That is not for pale women to know." Nightwind. Sarah turned the name over in her mind as the woman showed her which plants could heal and which could harm, speaking in a mixture of English and Apache that Sarah struggled to follow. But she listened intently, understanding that this knowledge might mean survival. As darkness fell, the captives were herded back to their sleeping area. The Henderson girls had spent the day in tears. And Mrs. Miller looked feverish despite the treatment her shoulder had received. Sarah did what she could to comfort them, but her own grief sat like a stone in her chest, too heavy for tears. She was settling the younger Henderson girl, Emma, just 14, when she sensed a presence. Nightwind stood at the edge of their small area, his face half in shadow from the dying cook fires. He held something in his hands. Without speaking, he set down what he carried, blankets, warmer than the thin ones they'd been given, and a water gourd. His eyes found Sarah's in the dimness, held them for a heartbeat. Then he was gone, moving silent as his name through the camp. "Why does he watch you, Mrs.?" Miller asked weakly. "I don't know," Sarah admitted, pulling one of the blankets around Emma's shoulders. But she thought of his mother's words. "He sees something in you," and wondered what an Apache chief could possibly see in a frontier minister's daughter who could barely carry water without spilling. That night, she lay awake listening to the alien sounds of the camp settling for sleep. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote howled, and others answered, their voices weaving through the darkness. She thought of Thomas, hoped desperately that someone had found him, that he was safe with other survivors. She thought too of Nightwind's scarred face, the way he'd looked at her across the battlefield, the unexpected gesture of the blankets. Nothing about him fit what she'd been told of Apache warriors, the bloodthirsty savages of newspaper accounts and fireside tales. He was something more complex, more human, and somehow that frightened her more than a simple monster would have. The stars wheeled overhead, the same stars that had watched over their wagon train just nights ago, but everything beneath them had changed. Sarah pulled the blanket higher, breathing in its scent of smoke and sage, and tried to imagine surviving another day in this valley that was both prison and refuge. Tomorrow would bring more work, more watching eyes, more of Nightwind's unsettling attention. But tonight, she was alive. The Henderson girls were alive, even Mrs. Miller, despite her fever, still breathed beside them. It wasn't much to hold on to, but it was something. As sleep finally claimed her, Sarah's last thought was a prayer, not for rescue or revenge, but simply for strength. Her mother's final words echoed in her mind. "Be strong, my sweet girl." In this strange valley surrounded by people who had every reason to hate her, strength might be the only currency that mattered. The coyotes sang their wild songs to the moon, and Sarah Whitman slept her first night as a captive. The Apache chief's blanket wrapped around her like an unwanted promise of things to come. Bridges of silence. The morning routine had become familiar after 2 weeks in the valley. Sarah woke before dawn, her body somehow attuned to the camp's rhythms. She helped Emma and young Mary Henderson with their hair, braiding it back the way the Apache women had shown them. Mrs. Miller's fever had broken 3 days ago, though her shoulder remained stiff and painful. Sarah was grinding corn when Nightwind approached. She'd grown used to his presence, the way he would appear at the edges of her day like a shadow given form. But this time, he didn't simply watch. He crouched beside her, setting down a handful of mesquite pods. "These," he said in careful English, "make sweet, good with corn." Sarah nearly dropped the grinding stone. It was the first time she'd heard him speak her language. His voice was deeper than she'd expected, rough like sand over stone. "You speak English," she said, then felt foolish for stating the obvious. "Some." He demonstrated how to crush the pods, his hands sure and practiced. Learned from traders, from soldiers. His mouth twisted slightly on the last word. Sarah focused on the pods, acutely aware of his proximity. This close. She could see the fine lines around his eyes, the way his hair fell forward as he worked. He smelled of horse and leather and something else. Sage, perhaps, or cedar smoke. Why? The question escaped before she could stop it. Why did you spare us? He was quiet so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, Apache take women sometimes, make strong children, learn new ways. He glanced at her, his dark eyes unreadable. But you, different reason. Before she could ask what he meant, shouts erupted from across the camp. A hunting party had returned, and with them came chaos. A mountain lion had attacked them on the trail, wounding 2 men before they'd killed it. Nightwind was on his feet instantly, calling orders. Sarah watched him take charge, directing the wounded to his mother's dwelling, organizing others to deal with the lion's carcass. His authority was absolute, unquestioned. The commotion drew everyone's attention, including the other captives. Sarah saw her chance and took it, moving to where Nightwind had left his water gourd. Tied to it was a small pouch, and from it, she carefully extracted a single eagle feather, the one he wore in his hair during ceremonies. She wasn't sure why she took it. Curiosity, perhaps. Or maybe she simply wanted something of his, some small piece of this man who held her life in his hands. She tucked it into her bodice just as his mother appeared. "You help," the older woman commanded, gesturing toward her dwelling. "Men are foolish. Get too close to lion. Now they bleed. Make much noise." Sarah found herself pressed into service as a healer's assistant. Nightwind's mother. She'd learned the woman was called Wise Crow, moved with practiced efficiency, cleaning wounds and applying poultices. She spoke in rapid Apache to Sarah, seeming to forget the girl couldn't understand, then switched to gestures and broken English. "Hold here. Press hard. No, harder. Warriors think they too strong for careful. You show them." One of the wounded was the young woman who'd pushed Sarah at the stream. A deep gash ran along her brother's leg, and she hovered anxiously as Wise Crow worked. When she saw Sarah, her face hardened. "No want pale woman touching him," she spat. Wise Crow said something sharp in Apache that made the young woman step back, chastened. To Sarah, she said, "That one is Spotted Dove. Much pride, little sense. You ignore." As Sarah held the warrior's legs steady for stitching, she became aware of Nightwind watching from the doorway. His expression was strange, something between surprise and approval. When their eyes met, she felt heat rise in her cheeks and looked away. The work took hours. By the time both men were bandaged and resting, Sarah's dress was blood-stained and her arms ached, but she felt more useful than she had since arriving in the valley. Wise Crow nodded approvingly. "You have steady hands. Good for healing. I teach more. If you want, learn." "Yes," Sarah said quickly. "I want to learn." That evening, Nightwind found her by the stream, washing the blood from her hands and arms. The sun was setting, painting the red rocks in shades of flame. "My mother says you did well," he said, standing carefully distant but close enough to talk. "She's a good teacher." Sarah dried her hands on her skirt, then gathered her courage. "Will you teach me too your language? I mean, it would help to understand." He studied her for a long moment. "Why you want this?" Sarah chose honesty. "Because I'm here. Because understanding might keep me and the others alive. Because—" She hesitated, then forged ahead. "Because you interest me, and I want to know why." Something flickered in his eyes. Surprise, perhaps, or respect. He sat on a flat rock, gesturing for her to sit as well, though at a proper distance. "First word," he said, pointing to himself. "Ndi means the people. What you call Apache." "Ndi," Sarah repeated, trying to match his pronunciation. "No." He shook his head, demonstrating again. "From here. He touched his throat, not just lips. They worked until darkness fell. Sarah learning simple words: water, sky, horse, fire. Night Wind was patient but exacting, making her repeat sounds until she got them right. When she finally managed to properly say, "Gohi Ahida," good morning, he almost smiled. "Tomorrow, more," he said, rising. Then he paused, looking down at her. "You ask why I interest you. I say same, why you interest me. Sarah Whitman." It was the first time he'd said her name. The sound of it in his accented English sent an unexpected shiver through her. After he left, Sarah realized she still had his eagle feather hidden in her bodice. She should return it. She knew, but something made her keep it. A secret pressed against her heart. The next days fell into a new pattern. Morning work, afternoon healing lessons with Wise Crow, evening language lessons with Night Wind. The other Apache watched these interactions with varying degrees of curiosity and disapproval. Spotted Dove, in particular, seemed to radiate hostility whenever Sarah was near Night Wind. "She wants him, Mrs." Miller observed one day as they hauled water together. "Wants to be Chief's wife. You're in her way." "I'm not in anyone's way," Sarah protested. "I'm a captive. I have no choice in any of this." But even as she said it, she knew it wasn't entirely true. She did have choices: to learn or resist, to understand or remain ignorant, to see Night Wind as a man or only as her captor. Each evening by the stream, she chose to see him as human. He taught her that his people called themselves Ende, that they had lived in these lands since time before memory. He showed her how to read the sky for weather, how to find water in the desert, which plants could heal and which could harm. In return, she told him about her life before, her father's small church in Missouri, her mother's garden, the books she'd loved to read. "Books," he said one evening, the word careful on his tongue. "I saw them once. Black marks that speak. Strange magic." "Not magic, just another language." Sarah picked up a stick and drew letters in the dirt. "This is A, first letter of Apache." His interest was immediate and intense. As she'd learned his spoken language, he began learning her written one. He was quick, his memory remarkable. Within days, he could write his name, not Night Wind, but the English translation of his child name, which he finally shared with her in a moment of trust. "My mother called me Hushke," he said quietly. "Means angry one. I was difficult child." Sarah laughed. Actually laughed. For the first time since the raid. Somehow that doesn't surprise me. He looked startled. Then his mouth curved in what was almost a smile. "You make jokes now. Good. Laughter keeps spirits strong." But not everyone appreciated their growing connection. One evening, Spotted Dove confronted Sarah as she returned from her lesson. The Apache woman blocked her path, speaking rapid words Sarah couldn't understand, but whose meaning was clear from her hostile tone. "I don't understand," Sarah said in Apache, one of the phrases Night Wind had taught her. Spotted Dove switched to English. "You think you special. Think he choose you, but you are nothing. Weak, pale nothing. When he tired of teaching pet, you see." She shoved past Sarah, deliberately hitting her shoulder hard enough to hurt. Sarah stumbled but didn't fall, her jaw set with determination. She wouldn't give Spotted Dove the satisfaction. That night, she fingered the hidden eagle feather and wondered what Night Wind saw when he looked at her. A curiosity. A student, something more. The questions frightened her more than Spotted Dove's threats. The feather seemed to burn against her skin. A secret reminder that despite everything, the violence of their meeting, the chasm between their worlds, the impossibility of it all, something was building between them, something as dangerous as it was undeniable. Tomorrow he would teach her more words. She would teach him more letters, and slowly, carefully. They were building a bridge across the silence that separated them, one word at a time. Storm and fire. The storm rolled in from the mountains like an angry god, turning the afternoon sky black as char. Sarah had seen prairie storms in Missouri, but nothing like this. The wind howled through the valley, tearing at the brush dwellings, sending cook fires sparking into chaos. "Inside, everyone inside," Wise Crow shouted, her usual calm cracking as she herded the children toward shelter. Lightning split the sky, followed immediately by thunder that seemed to shake the earth itself. Sarah was helping Emma and Mary Henderson secure their shelter when she heard the screaming. One of the horses, a young mare Nightwind had been training, had broken free from her tether in panic. The animal ran wild through the camp, eyes rolling white with terror. "Stay here," Sarah ordered the girls, then rushed out into the storm. Rain lashed at her face, instantly soaking through her dress. She could barely see through the downpour, but she heard the mare's frightened whinnies and the shouts of men trying to corner her. The horse burst through a cluster of dwellings, heading straight for the steep path that led up the valley wall. In this weather, on those rocks, she would surely fall and break her legs, or worse. Sarah didn't think. She'd grown up around horses, had helped her father gentle countless foals. She planted herself in the mare's path, arms spread wide, making herself as large as possible. "Whoa, girl, easy now, easy." The mare skidded, mud spraying, her hooves sliding dangerously close to the edge. For a heart-stopping moment, Sarah thought they would both go over. Then strong arms wrapped around her waist, pulling her back just as the mare's shoulder clipped her, sending them both tumbling into the mud. Nightwind's body cushioned her fall. Taking the brunt of the impact, they rolled twice before coming to a stop. Sarah sprawled across his chest, both of them covered in red mud and breathing hard. Foolish woman. His English deserted him in his anger, and he continued in rapid Apache that she was beginning to understand all too well. The general theme involved her lack of sense and apparent death wish. "The horse," she started. "Horse can be replaced. You cannot—" The words came out fierce, his hands gripping her arms as if to shake sense into her. Then he seemed to realize their position, how close they were, how her body pressed against his, and his grip gentled. The rain poured over them, washing streaks through the mud on their faces. Sarah became acutely aware of every point of contact between them, of the rise and fall of his chest beneath her, of how his hands had shifted from her arms to her waist. His eyes, usually so controlled, showed something raw and unguarded. "Sarah," just her name, but the way he said it made her shiver despite the cold rain. A shout broke the moment. The mare had been caught, and others were calling for their chief. Nightwind helped her to her feet, his touch careful now, almost formal, but the look he gave her before turning away burned hotter than any fire. That evening, after the storm had passed, the camp gathered around the central fire to assess the damage. Several dwellings needed repair, and they'd lost some of their stored food to water damage. But no one had been seriously hurt, and the horses were all accounted for. Sarah sat with the other captive women, trying to ignore the way her skin still tingled where Nightwind had touched her. She'd changed into dry clothes, Apache dress that Wise Crow had given her, saying her white woman's clothes were too impractical, but she still felt the phantom pressure of his hands. "You're shaking, Mrs." Miller observed quietly. "Just cold," Sarah lied. Across the fire, Nightwind sat with the other leaders, discussing repairs, but his eyes found hers through the flames, and the look in them made her stomach flip. Something had shifted between them in that moment in the mud, something that couldn't be taken back. Spotted Dove noticed too. She sat close to Nightwind, trying to draw his attention, offering him food, touching his arm when she spoke, but his focus remained on Sarah, obvious enough that others began to notice. Whispers rippled through the gathering like wind through grass. When Wise Crow called Sarah to help distribute the evening meal, she felt the weight of many eyes following her. The older woman said nothing, but her knowing look spoke volumes. "You saved Swift Rain," she said finally, referring to the mare. "Nightwind prizes that horse. You did dangerous thing, but brave thing. It was instinct. Sarah said, I didn't think. No, you felt sometimes that's stronger than thinking. Wise Crow handed her a pot of stew. Take this to my son. He has not eaten. Sarah wanted to protest, to send someone else. But Wise Crow's expression brooked no argument. She carried the pot to where Nightwind sat, aware of the sudden hush that fell over nearby conversations. Your mother says you need to eat, she said in Apache, proud of how steady her voice remained. He looked up at her, and she saw surprise flicker across his features, not at her presence, but at her use of his language. Aye, he said. Thank you. As she turned to go, his hand caught her wrist, not hard, just enough to stop her. Tonight, stream, more lessons. It wasn't a question. Sarah nodded, not trusting her voice, and pulled free, but she felt the burn of his touch all the way back to her seat. The evening gathering broke up slowly, people drifting to their dwellings to repair storm damage. Sarah helped where she could, trying to keep busy, trying not to think about meeting Nightwind. But the sun sank lower, and eventually, there was no more work to delay her. She found him at their usual spot by the stream, but tonight he'd built a small fire. The flames danced between them as she sat down, creating a barrier that felt both protective and frustrating. You were angry earlier, she said after a moment of silence. Yes. He poked at the fire with a stick, sending sparks spiraling upward. You risk yourself for horse. Why? I told you, instinct. No. He looked at her then, firelight playing across his features. You choose to help. Always you choose to help. With healing, with children, today with horse. Why? Sarah considered the question. Because it's right, because helping is what makes us human. Even helping those who took you from your people. The question hung between them like a blade. Sarah met his gaze steadily. You're human too. Your mother, the children here, they're human. I can hate what happened and still see that. He was quiet for a long time. Then, you are not like other white women we have taken. How many? Sarah stopped herself, not sure she wanted to know. Some, over years, they fight or they break, become Apache or die inside. You do neither. You stay yourself but also learn, adapt, like water that finds new path but stays water. The poetic nature of his words surprised her. She was learning that Nightwind had depth she was only beginning to discover. Maybe I'm just practical, she said softly. My mother always said I was too practical for my own good. Your mother, his voice gentled. You miss her. It wasn't a question, but Sarah nodded anyway, tears suddenly threatening. Every day, I dream about them sometimes. Wake up thinking I'll see my father reading his Bible, hear my mother humming while she cooks. Then I remember, the pain grows smaller, he said quietly. Never gone, but smaller, like scar instead of wound. Experience. My father, 2 winters passed. Soldiers came in winter, when they thought we weak. He died protecting the village. Nightwind's jaw tightened. I became chief too young, still learning. Sarah wanted to reach across the fire, to offer comfort, but she didn't dare. Instead, she said, You're a good chief. Your people respect you. Respect born from fear is weak. Rather have respect from... He paused, searching for the word. From understanding. Trust. Like Wise Crow's respect. Yes, and... He looked at her intently. And yours. The word hung between them, heavy with meaning. Sarah felt her cheeks warm and looked away. You have it, my respect. Do I? He stood suddenly, moving around the fire to crouch beside her. Close, too close. Even though I led raid that killed your family, even though I keep you here. Sarah's breath caught. This close. She could see flecks of gold in his dark eyes, could smell sage and smoke on his skin. You could have killed us all. You didn't. You could treat us as slaves. I don't understand all your reasons, but I respect the man I'm coming to know." He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and touched a strand of her hair that had escaped her braid. "Your hair holds firelight, like sunset on wheat fields." The unexpected poetry of it, the gentle touch, undid something in Sarah, without conscious thought. She leaned into his hand as it moved to cup her cheek. "This is dangerous," she whispered. "Yes," he agreed, but didn't pull away. They stayed frozen like that for several heartbeats, balanced on the edge of something irreversible. Then a branch snapped in the darkness, and they sprang apart like guilty children. Spotted Dove emerged from the shadows, her face twisted with fury. She spat words at Night Wind in Apache too fast for Sarah to follow, but their meaning was clear. Then she whirled on Sarah, switching to English. "You think you win something, you nothing but white witch, casting spells. He wake up, see truth. Then you learn what happens to women who reach too high." She stalked off before either could respond. Night Wind's face had closed off, becoming the impassive mask Sarah had first known. "Go back," he said quietly. "Storm brought more than rain. Brought change. Need time to think." Sarah stood on shaking legs, her cheek still burning from his touch. "I still have your eagle feather," she blurted out, not knowing why she chose that moment to confess. "I took it that day with the mountain lion. I'm sorry." Something flickered in his eyes. Surprise, perhaps even pleasure. "Keep it," he said, "until I ask for its return." She fled then, back to her shelter where Emma and Mary slept peacefully, unaware of how the world had tilted on its axis. Sarah lay awake long into the night, fingers pressed to her cheek where he touched her, the eagle feather pressed against her heart. The storm had indeed brought change, and like the lightning that had split the sky, there would be no going back to what was before. The words beneath the stars. 3 days passed without their evening lessons. Night Wind kept his distance, though Sarah felt his eyes on her as she went about her daily tasks. The camp buzzed with tension, whispers following her everywhere. Even Wise Crow seemed more reserved, watching her son with worried eyes. On the 4th night, Sarah couldn't stand it anymore. After the evening meal, when the camp had settled into its nighttime rhythms, she made her way to the stream. Their usual spot was empty, the ashes of their last fire cold and scattered. She sat anyway, drawing her knees to her chest, staring at the water that gleamed silver under the rising moon. Perhaps it was better this way. What future could there be between an Apache chief and a captive white woman? The moment by the fire had been madness, nothing more. "You should not be here alone." Sarah jumped, her hand flying to her heart. Night Wind stood at the edge of the clearing, half in shadow. He looked tired, she thought, older somehow than he had 4 days ago. "Neither should you," she said softly. He moved closer but didn't sit, instead standing with his back to a cottonwood tree. "The people talk. They say I forget who I am, who you are." "And have you—" "No." The word came out harsh. "I forget nothing. Not the raid, not your father falling, not your mother's blood on the ground. I remember all—" Sarah flinched at the brutal recitation. "Then why—" "Because remembering is not same as understanding." He pushed away from the tree, pacing like a caged mountain cat. "First time I saw you, across the battle. You did not scream, did not run. You stood still as stone, looking at me like you could see through skin to spirit. No fear. Why no fear?" Sarah thought back to that terrible moment. There was fear, but also recognition, like I'd been waiting my whole life to see you, and there you were at the worst possible moment. He stopped pacing, his eyes catching the moonlight. "Yes, this is what I felt, what I still feel. It makes no sense." "No," Sarah agreed. "It doesn't." They stood there, the stream babbling between them, the weight of impossibility pressing down like a physical thing. Then Nightwind moved, crossing to where she sat in 3 quick strides. He dropped to his knees before her, close enough that she could see the pulse beating at his throat. I have tried to stay away, tried to remember you are enemy, but you are in my thoughts like arrow I cannot pull out. His hands clenched and unclenched at his sides. Tell me to leave. Say you hate me for what I did. Make this easier. Sarah's throat tightened. She could do what he asked, could speak the words that would send him away. It would be simpler, safer. Instead, she reached out slowly and placed her hand over his clenched fist. I can't, she whispered. God help me, I can't. His hand turned under hers, fingers interlacing. For a long moment, they stayed like that, connected by that single point of contact. Then he pulled back, standing in one fluid motion. Tomorrow night, he said, his voice rough. The people gather for ceremony, full moon ceremony. You will come. As a captive. As my guest. He paused, seeming to wrestle with something. Wear the eagle feather. Before she could respond, he was gone, melting back into the darkness. Sarah sat by the stream until her legs went numb, trying to understand what had just happened. As my guest, the words carried weight she didn't fully understand. The next day crawled by. Wise Crow said nothing when Sarah helped her prepare ceremonial foods, but her knowing looks spoke volumes. Even the other captives noticed something was different. What's happening tonight, Mrs.? Miller asked as they ground corn. The whole camp is buzzing. Full moon ceremony, Sarah said carefully. Nightwind asked me to attend. Mrs. Miller's hand stilled. Sarah, be careful. These people, their ways aren't ours. I know, but even as she said it, Sarah wondered if that was still true. When had their ways started feeling less foreign? When had she stopped thinking of escape and started thinking of belonging? As sunset approached, Spotted Dove appeared at their shelter. Sarah expected hostility, but the Apache woman's face was carefully neutral. He sends this, she said curtly, holding out a bundle. Says you know what to do. Inside was a dress unlike any Sarah had seen in the camp, soft doe skin bleached pale as cream, decorated with intricate beadwork, blue and silver, like water under moonlight. It was beautiful and clearly valuable. This was his mother's? Emma breathed, touching the beads reverently. Sarah's hands shook as she changed into the dress. It fit as if made for her, the soft leather moving like a second skin. She braided her hair in the Apache style Wise Crow had taught her, then carefully wove the eagle feather into the plait. When she emerged from the shelter, conversations stopped. Even Spotted Dove looked stunned, though fury quickly replaced surprise in her eyes. Sarah walked through the camp feeling every gaze, her chin high despite her racing heart. The ceremony ground was a flat area beyond the main camp, where a great fire already burned. The people sat in circles around it, men in the inner ring, women behind them, children scattered throughout. Drums beat a rhythm that seemed to match Sarah's heartbeat. Nightwind stood by the fire, and when he saw her, something flared in his eyes. He wore ceremonial dress-painted leather, feathers, and copper bands that caught the firelight. He looked magnificent and terrifying and utterly foreign. Yet the way he watched her approach was achingly familiar. He gestured to a place near the fire, not with the women, but beside where he would sit. The statement was unmistakable. Whispers rippled through the gathering like wind through leaves. Sarah sat carefully, aware of every eye upon her. Nightwind remained standing, addressing his people in Apache. She caught perhaps half the words. Something about change, about paths crossing, about the spirits bringing unexpected gifts. Then he looked directly at her and switched to English, his voice carrying clear in the night air. The white woman saved swift rain in the storm. She heals with my mother. She learns our words, our ways. The spirits mark her as different. He paused, his eyes never leaving hers. I claim her as mine. Let any who object speak now. Sarah's breath caught, The words rang with ceremonial weight, with finality. Around the fire, the people stirred, murmuring among themselves. Several warriors looked unhappy, and Spotted Dove seemed ready to explode, but none spoke against their chief. Nightwind sat beside her then, close enough that she could feel the heat from his body. The drums resumed, and the ceremony continued. Dancing, singing, rituals Sarah didn't understand, but she felt the power of it, the way the firelight and drum beats and chanting voices wove together into something ancient and profound. At some point, Nightwind's hand found hers in the flickering shadows between them. His thumb traced circles on her palm, a secret touch hidden from the crowd. Sarah's skin burned where he touched her, her whole being focused on that small point of connection. The moon rose full and bright, bathing everything in silver. The dancing grew wilder, the drums faster. Then, gradually, the ceremony began to wind down. Families with children left first, then others, until only a few remained by the dying fire. Nightwind stood, drawing her up with him. He led her away from the fire, past the camp boundaries, to a rise that overlooked the valley. The moonlight was so bright they could see every detail of the landscape. The red rocks turned to silver, the stream, a ribbon of light. "Do you understand what happened tonight?" he asked softly. "You claimed me, publicly, but I don't understand what that means." He turned to face her, his hands coming up to frame her face. "It means you are under my protection. No one can harm you. No one can take you. It means—" He paused, struggling with words. "It means I choose you, Sarah Whitman. Despite all that divides us, despite the impossibility, I choose you." Sarah's eyes filled with tears. "I don't understand why." "Because you see me. Not Apache chief, not enemy. You see Nightwind, who was once angry child called Hashke. You see man who mourns his father, who fears he leads badly, who watches you and forgets to breathe." His thumbs wiped away her tears. "Be my woman, Sarah. Not just tonight, all nights." The words hung between them, heavy with promise and impossibility. Sarah thought of her parents, of the life she'd lost, of the brother she might never see again. She thought of the barriers between them, culture, language, the blood that had been shed. But she also thought of his patience as he taught her his language, of his mother's kindness, of the way he'd held her in the storm. She thought of the eagle feather hidden against her heart all these weeks, of the future stretching uncertain before them. "I don't know how," she whispered. "Neither do I," he admitted. "But we learn, like words, like healing. One day, then next day, then next." Sarah looked into his eyes and saw her own hope reflected there. Fragile, but real. Instead of answering with words, she reached up and pulled the eagle feather from her braid, holding it out to him. "I believe this is yours," she said softly. He took it, but instead of keeping it, he wove it back into her hair with gentle hands. "No, is yours now. I gave when I spoke words by fire. You are my woman. This says so to all who see. The night wind." He silenced her with a finger to her lips. "Sky sees, moon sees, spirits see. Sarah is Nightwind's woman. Nightwind is Sarah's man. Simple truth." Standing there under the vast western sky, with the moon as witness and the valleys spread below them, it did seem simple. Tomorrow would bring complications, cultural clashes, suspicious looks, impossibilities to navigate. But tonight, in this moment, there was only truth. "Yes," Sarah said, the word carrying on the night wind. "I'll be your woman, tonight and all nights, despite everything, because of everything." He kissed her then, under the watching moon, and Sarah felt something inside her break open and reform, like a bone that heals stronger after breaking. She was no longer the minister's daughter from Missouri. She was something new, something forged in loss and found in the most unexpected place. When they finally returned to camp, walking hand in hand, the fire had burned to embers. But Sarah felt like she carried fire inside her now, a flame that would not be easily extinguished. She was Nightwind's woman. The impossibility of it took her breath away. But then the possible had died with her parents on a dusty trail. All she had left was the impossible, and the man beside her who made it seem like destiny. Blood and firelight. The challenge came 3 days later, just as the morning sun painted the valley walls crimson. Sarah was helping Wise Crow prepare medicines when they heard the commotion. Angry voices rising above the usual camp sounds. The gathering crowd's nervous energy. "Stay here," Wise Crow commanded. But Sarah was already moving toward the noise, dread pooling in her stomach. In the center of camp, 2 men faced each other. Nightwind stood calm and still, but Sarah could see the tension in his shoulders. Across from him, a warrior she recognized as Black Eagle, one of the strongest fighters, and Spotted Dove's cousin, gestured angrily as he spoke. "He challenges Nightwind's leadership," someone translated quietly beside her. Sarah turned to find the young warrior whose legs she'd helped save, watching the scene with worried eyes. "Says Nightwind grows weak, thinks more of White Woman than his people." Sarah's heart clenched. This was her fault. Her presence had created this division. Nightwind responded in measured tones, his voice carrying authority despite its calmness. But Black Eagle spat on the ground, a clear insult, and spoke words that made the crowd gasp. "What did he say?" Sarah demanded. The young warrior looked uncomfortable. "He says Nightwind dishonors his father's memory. Says true Apache chief would not take enemy to his bed. Says..." He paused, clearly not wanting to continue. "Tell me." "Says you are witch who has clouded Nightwind's mind, that when he is chief, you will burn for your magic." Ice flooded Sarah's veins. She'd heard enough to know what came next. Black Eagle was calling for combat, a fight for leadership, likely to the death or until one yielded. And yielding would mean exile. Nightwind's response was swift. He removed his shirt, revealing the scars of a lifetime of warfare, and spoke a single word that needed no translation. "Yes." The camp exploded into activity. A circle was cleared. Weapons chosen. Knives, not guns. This would be close. Personal combat. Sarah found herself pushed back with the other women, Wise Crow's hand gripping her arm. "You must not interfere," the older woman said sharply. "Whatever happens, you stay back. To enter the circle means death." "This is because of me," Sarah said desperately. "I should..." "Should what leave run you think that stops this?" Wise Crow's eyes were fierce. "Black Eagle wants power. You are excuse, not reason. This fight was coming." The 2 men entered the circle, and silence fell. Black Eagle was younger, perhaps stronger, but Nightwind moved with the fluid grace of experience, his knife held with easy familiarity. They circled each other, testing, feinting. Then Black Eagle lunged, his blade slicing air where Nightwind had been a heartbeat before. The fight began in earnest, a deadly dance of strike and counterstrike, dodge and parry. Sarah watched with her heart in her throat. She'd seen violence before, but this was different. This was ritualized, purposeful, carrying the weight of tradition and law. Every move spoke of years of training, of a culture where personal combat settled disputes. Black Eagle drew first blood, his knife catching Nightwind's shoulder. The crowd murmured, and Spotted Dove smiled triumphantly. But Nightwind didn't even flinch, using Black Eagle's moment of satisfaction to sweep his legs, sending the younger man crashing to the ground. They grappled in the dust, knives flashing in the morning sun. Sarah could barely breathe, her fingernails digging into her palms. She saw the moment Black Eagle's blade found Nightwind's side, saw the bloom of red across his skin, and bit back a cry. But Nightwind twisted, using Black Eagle's momentum against him, and suddenly the younger warrior was on his back with Nightwind's knife at his throat. The camp held its breath. "Yield," Nightwind commanded, blood running down his side. Black Eagle's eyes burned with hatred, but he had no choice. "I yield," he spat, Nightwind stood slowly, favoring his wounded side. You challenged. You lost. By our law, you can leave or accept my leadership. Choose. For a moment, Sarah thought Black Eagle might attack again. Then he rolled to his feet and stalked away without a word. Spotted Dove followed, but not before shooting Sarah a look of pure venom. Nightwind turned to address the camp, but his words were cut short as his knees buckled. Sarah broke free from Wise Crow's grip and ran to him, catching him before he could fall. "Stubborn man," she muttered in Apache, pressing her hand against the wound in his side. Too proud to show pain. He managed a weak smile. "Must show strength. For people." "The people can wait. You're bleeding." Wise Crow appeared beside them. "All business. Bring him to my dwelling. Quickly." Together, they half-carried Nightwind to his mother's healing place. Sarah helped strip away his bloodied clothes, trying to stay clinical despite her fear. The wound in his side was deep but clean. The shoulder cut was shallow. Both would heal, if infection didn't set in. "Hold him," Wise Crow instructed, preparing her medicines. Sarah cradled Nightwind's head in her lap as his mother worked. He gripped her hand hard enough to hurt when Wise Crow cleaned the wounds with something that made him hiss through clenched teeth. "Talk," he ground out. "Distract." So Sarah talked, nonsense mostly, about the herbs she was learning, about how Swift Rain was getting fat from too many treats, about anything except how scared she'd been watching him fight. He focused on her voice, on her face above him, using her presence as an anchor against the pain. When Wise Crow finished stitching and binding his wounds, he was pale but conscious. The older woman stood, wiping her hands. "He will live. Scars to add to collection, but will live." She looked at Sarah. "You stay. He heals better with reason to heal." After she left, Sarah gently smoothed Nightwind's hair back from his forehead. "That was foolish, fighting over me." "Not over you," he corrected weakly. "Over fear, change. Black Eagle sees only past. I must see future, or people die." He caught her hand, pressing it to his chest where his heart beat steady and strong. "You are part of that future. Your people may never accept me. Some will, others won't, is way of change." He pulled her down until her forehead rested against his. "I almost lost you once to violence. Today, you almost lost me. Makes truth clear, life too short for fear." Sarah closed her eyes, breathing him in, sweat and blood and herbs and something essentially him. "When I saw that knife go in, I thought, I can't lose you too, I can't." "You won't, too stubborn to die." He managed a ghost of his usual smile. "Besides, must teach you rest of language. Your pronunciation's still terrible." She laughed, despite everything. The sound watery. "Careful, or I'll let Spotted Dove nurse you instead." "Cruel woman." His hand cupped her cheek. "My woman." They stayed like that as the sun climbed higher, Sarah keeping watch while Nightwind dozed fitfully. People came and went, warriors reporting that Black Eagle had indeed left. Taking Spotted Dove and a handful of supporters with him, the majority remained, their loyalty confirmed by the combat's outcome. Mrs. Miller appeared at one point with the Henderson girls. "We were worried," she said softly, taking in the scene. Sarah in Apache dress, Nightwind's blood on her hands, the intimate way they touched. "I'm all right," Sarah assured her. "We're all right." "Mrs." Miller studied her for a long moment. "You've chosen, haven't you, this life, him?" "Yes." The word came out sure, certain. "I have." "Then God help you both." "Mrs." Miller said, but not unkindly. "The world isn't ready for what you're trying to build." After they left, Nightwind stirred. "She is right. World not ready." "Then we make it ready," Sarah said fiercely. "One day at a time, one person at a time, starting here, with your people." "Our people," he corrected. "You are one of us now. My mother will teach you the ceremony. Make it formal." Sarah's throat tightened. "You mean marriage, Apache way first, then, when we can, your way too. Make both spirits happy." He winced as he shifted. "If you say yes—" "I already said yes, under the moon, remember." "Say again. Want to hear?" Sarah leaned down and kissed him softly, carefully of his injuries. "Yes, Nightwind. Hashke. Yes to all of it. The challenges, the differences, the impossibilities. Yes." He smiled, real and full this time. "Then I fight 100 Black Eagles. Worth it for you." "No more fighting," Sarah said firmly. "You've shed enough blood for one lifetime." But even as she said it, she knew it wasn't true. There would be more challenges. From his people, from hers. From a world that wouldn't understand what they were trying to build, but looking at him, wounded for defending their bond, Sarah felt something fierce and protective rise in her chest. They would face whatever came, together, the minister's daughter and the Apache chief, building a bridge between worlds one careful stone at a time. It wouldn't be easy. But then, nothing worth having ever was. The answer she couldn't deny. Nightwind's recovery took 7 days. 7 days of Sarah barely leaving his side, of Wise Crow teaching her deeper healing arts, of the camp slowly accepting this new reality. The other captive women watched her with a mixture of awe and concern, while the Apache people seemed to reassess their initial hostility. On the 8th morning, Sarah woke in her usual place beside Nightwind's pallet to find him gone. Panic flared until she heard his voice outside, strong and clear, addressing his warriors. She emerged to find him standing tall despite the healing wounds, issuing orders for a hunting party. "You should be resting," she scolded in Apache, causing several warriors to hide smiles. "Chief cannot rest when people need food," he replied, but his eyes softened when they met hers. "Tonight, my dwelling. Come when moon rises." Sarah spent the day in nervous energy. Wise Crow watched her fumble simple tasks with knowing amusement. "You think too much," the older woman finally said. "Heart knows truth, mind makes complications." "It's just, everything has happened so fast. The raid was only 2 months ago. How can the world change so completely in 2 months?" "World does not change. You change. See with new eyes." Wise Crow set aside her grinding stone. "I tell you something. When Nightwind was born, Shaman saw vision. Said he would bridge 2 worlds. I thought it meant he would be great warrior, fight many enemies. Now I think different meaning." That evening, Sarah bathed in the stream, braided her hair with special care, and put on the ceremonial dress she'd worn to the moon ceremony. The eagle feather went in last, her fingers trembling slightly as she secured it. Nightwind's dwelling sat slightly apart from the others, befitting his status as chief. Sarah had never been inside before. She paused at the entrance, heart hammering. "Come," his voice called softly. She ducked through the opening to find the space transformed. Furs covered the floor, and small oil lamps cast warm light on the hide walls. Nightwind sat near a small fire, wearing simple leather pants and a soft shirt that wouldn't irritate his healing wounds. His hair hung loose around his shoulders, making him look younger, more vulnerable. "Sit," he said, gesturing to a place beside him. Sarah settled onto the furs, hyper-aware of every movement. They sat in silence for a moment, the fire crackling between them. "I have something for you," he said finally, producing a small leather pouch. Inside was a necklace, silver and turquoise beads interspersed with small white shells. "Was my grandmother's. My mother saved it for woman I would choose." Sarah's throat tightened as he moved behind her to fasten it around her neck. His fingers brushed her nape, sending shivers down her spine. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "You make it beautiful." He returned to face her, his expression serious. "Sarah, I must know truth. The night of moon ceremony. You said yes, But that was passion, moment. Now I ask again, with clear mind, will you be my wife knowing all it means? Sarah met his gaze steadily. What does it mean, tell me plainly? Means you become Apache in all but blood. Learn our ways fully. Bear children who will be both Apache and white, belonging to neither world completely. Means when soldiers come, and they will come, you stand with us. Means giving up hope of returning to your people. My people are dead, Sarah said quietly, except for Thomas, and I pray he's safe somewhere, building a new life. I can't live in the past. Nightwind, I tried hating you, hating your people, but hate is heavy, too heavy to carry forever. And love is that heavy too? The question hung between them. Sarah had been dancing around the word for days, maybe weeks, but sitting here in his dwelling, wearing his grandmother's necklace, she couldn't hide anymore. No, she said softly. Love is unexpected, terrifying, but not heavy. It lifts me up when I think I should drown in grief. When I see you, when you teach me your language, when you look at me like I'm not your enemy but your equal. I forget to mourn. Is that wrong? No, is gift. Your parents would not want you trapped in sorrow. He leaned forward, taking her hands. I speak truth now. When I led raid, I was angry. Soldiers had attacked our winter camp, killed many. I wanted revenge. But when I saw you, standing so still, looking at me without fear, something in me recognized something in you, like two pieces of broken stone that fit together. That's why you spared us. Yes, my warriors thought me weak, but I knew you were meant to live, meant to come here, meant to change things. His thumbs traced circles on her palms. I did not expect to love you. That came quiet, like snow, one flake, then another, until whole world is white. Sarah's eyes filled with tears. I fought it, told myself it was gratitude, or Stockholm Syndrome, or simple loneliness. But when Black Eagle challenged you, when I thought I might lose you, she took a shaky breath. I love you, despite everything, because of everything. I love your strength and your gentleness. I love how you teach with patience, lead with wisdom. I love that you see me as more than just a white woman, more than just a captive. Never just captive, he said fiercely. From beginning, you were more. And now I'm yours. If you'll have me, knowing I'll make mistakes, say the wrong things, struggle with traditions, knowing there will be those who never accept us, knowing the danger. Instead of answering with words, Nightwind drew her into his arms, mindful of his healing wounds. Sarah melted against him, feeling like she'd come home to a place she'd never known existed. His lips found hers, gentle at first, then deeper as passion sparked between them. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against hers. You are sure, no doubts? Doubts about the future, many. Doubts about you, about us, none. She pulled back to look at him. I choose you. Nightwind, I choose this life. I choose to learn, to grow, to build something new with you. He smiled then, brilliant and true. Then we marry. Apache ceremony in 3 days. When moon is dark, new beginning in darkness, like seed in earth, then we grow toward light together. Yes, Sarah said, the word coming out as naturally as breathing. Yes to all of it. They talked long into the night, planning their future. He would teach her to ride as the Apache did, to read the land's signs. She would help him navigate the changing world, teach his people English and writing to help them survive what was coming. They would have children who could walk in both worlds, who might help heal the wounds between peoples. It won't be easy, Nightwind said as the fire burned low. My people will test you, your people, if we encounter them. We'll call you traitor. Then we face it together, Sarah said simply. That's what marriage means. Isn't it facing whatever comes, side by side? He kissed her again, soft and sweet. You are wiser than your years. Sarah Whitman. Soon to be Sarah Nightwind, she teased. Sarah who belongs to Nightwind, Nightwind who belongs to Sarah. Names matter less than truth. As the night grew late, he walked her back to her shelter, propriety still mattering for 3 more days. At the entrance, he caught her hand. No regrets, he asked one more time. Sarah thought of her parents, of the life she'd lost, of the dreams that had died with that wagon train. Then she thought of the life she was choosing. Difficult, dangerous, but full of purpose and unexpected love. No regrets, she said firmly. Only gratitude, for you, for this chance, for a future I never could have imagined. He lifted her hand to his lips, a gesture both Apache and gentlemanly. 3 days, then you are mine before all. I'm already yours, Sarah whispered. The ceremony just makes it official. She watched him walk away, moving carefully but with renewed strength. In 3 days, she would bind her life to his in ways that couldn't be undone. The minister's daughter would become an Apache chief's wife. The captive would become the chosen. Inside the shelter, Emma Henderson stirred. Sarah, are you really going to marry him? Yes, sweet girl, I am. But they're human, Sarah finished gently. Different from us, yes, but human. And he loves me. Emma, in all this pain and loss, we found love. Isn't that worth holding on to? Emma was quiet for a moment. Then, I hope someone loves me like that someday. Like it doesn't matter where you come from, only where you're going. Sarah smoothed the girl's hair. That's exactly what love is. And yes, you'll find it too. Even in the darkest places, love finds a way to grow. As she settled down to sleep, Sarah touched the necklace at her throat and smiled. In 3 days, she would take the final step into her new life. No more looking back, no more 1 foot in each world. She would be Nightwind's wife, an Apache woman in all but blood. The thought should have terrified her. Instead, she felt only peace. This was her answer. The one she couldn't deny even if she wanted to. Love had found her in the most impossible place, with the most impossible person. And she would spend the rest of her life proving that impossible love could be the strongest kind of all. Under the same sky. The wedding ceremony began at sunset, when the sky blazed with colors that matched the red rocks surrounding their valley. Sarah stood in Wise Crow's dwelling, her hands trembling as the older woman applied the final touches of ceremonial paint to her face, white clay and red ochre in patterns that marked her as a bride. You are ready, Wise Crow pronounced, stepping back to survey her work. Not just in appearance, in spirit. Sarah wore a dress made by the women of the tribe. Each had contributed something, even those who had initially shown hostility. The gesture moved her deeply. It was white doeskin like Nightwind's grandmother's dress, but decorated with both Apache patterns and small blue flowers that reminded them of her origins. The people accept you, Wise Crow said, reading her thoughts. You proved yourself, not by trying to be Apache, but by being yourself with honest heart. Emma and Mary Henderson waited outside, having begged to be part of the ceremony. Mrs. Miller stood with them, her face showing a mixture of concern and resignation. She had chosen to stay with the tribe rather than risk the dangerous journey to find other settlements. But she still struggled with Sarah's choice. You look beautiful, Emma breathed, like a princess from a fairy tale. A fairy tale where the princess marries the dragon, Mrs., Miller said quietly, then sighed. Forgive me, Sarah. I see how he looks at you, how you look at him. I just worry. I know, Sarah said gently. But this is my choice, my happiness. The drums began, deep and rhythmic, calling the people to gather. Sarah's heart matched their beat as Wise Crow led her toward the ceremonial ground. The entire tribe had assembled, forming a great circle with the sacred fire at its center. And there, Waiting for her stood Night Wind. He wore ceremonial dress she'd never seen before, white leather adorned with eagle feathers, his face painted with symbols of his status as chief. But it was his eyes that caught her, warm and full of love as he watched her approach. The ceremony was unlike anything from Sarah's Protestant upbringing, yet it felt sacred all the same. They stood before the fire as the shaman, an ancient man whose face was a map of years, spoke in Apache. Wise Crow translated the important parts quietly. Two paths become one path. Two spirits join in journey. What was broken is made whole. What was enemy becomes beloved. Night Wind took her hands, and Sarah was surprised to find his trembling too. This mighty chief, who had faced death without flinching, was nervous on his wedding day. It made her love him even more. They exchanged vows in both languages. Night Wind spoke first in Apache, then English. Sarah Whitman, you came to us in blood and sorrow, but from sorrow grew understanding. From understanding grew love. I take you as my wife, to protect, to cherish, to stand beside through all seasons. Your people become my people. Your God stands beside our spirits. Together we are stronger than apart. Sarah's voice was steady despite her tears. Night Wind, Hashke, you spared my life when you had every reason to take it. You showed me that beneath our differences, we are the same people who love, who grieve, who hope. I take you as my husband, to support, to love, to build a bridge between worlds with your people become my people. Your spirits stand beside my God. Together we write a new story. The shaman bound their hands with a cord woven from sweetgrass and sage, chanting blessings. Then came traditions Sarah had learned about but not fully understood until now. The sharing of corn pollen, the exchange of gifts between families. Since Sarah had no family present, Wise Crow stood for her, accepting the gifts with dignity. As the sun sank below the valley walls, the celebration began in earnest. Food appeared, venison and corn cakes, wild berries and pine nuts. The drums shifted to celebratory rhythms, and dancing began. Night Wind led Sarah in the traditional steps she'd been practicing, his hands steady on her waist. No stepping on feet, she whispered, proud of herself. You learn well, he replied, spinning her gracefully. My wife learns well. The word sent shivers through her. Wife. She was Night Wind's wife now, bound by Apache law and tradition. Later, he'd promised, they would find a way to have a Christian ceremony too, to honor both their traditions. But for now, this was enough, more than enough. As the evening progressed, people approached them with gifts and well wishes. Warriors who had once looked at her with suspicion now nodded respectfully. Women who had kept their distance now smiled and touched her hands. Even some who had supported Black Eagle's challenge seemed to accept this new reality. You did this, Night Wind said quietly during a break in the dancing. Not the ceremony. You, by being yourself, by working hard, by showing respect even when not given respect back. We did this, Sarah corrected. Together. Later, much later, when the moon had risen and the celebration had wound down, Night Wind led her to their dwelling, their home now. The space had been transformed again, decorated with flowers and herbs that filled the air with sweet scent. New furs covered the floor, wedding gifts from various families. Are you happy? He asked, suddenly uncertain. Sarah answered by pulling him down for a kiss, pouring all her love and certainty into it. When they broke apart, both breathless, she smiled. I'm standing in an Apache dwelling, married to an Apache chief, wearing paint on my face and feathers in my hair. 2 months ago, I would have thought it a nightmare. Now, she touched his face gently. Now I can't imagine any other life. They spent their wedding night learning each other in new ways, discovering that love could be both fierce and tender, passionate and patient. Outside, the camp settled into sleep. But inside their dwelling, Sarah and Night Wind created their own world, separate from Apache or white, existing in the space between. When dawn came, painting the sky in soft pastels, Sarah woke in her husband's arms. The reality of it hit her anew. She was married to the man who had led the raid that killed her parents. The impossibility of it should have crushed her. Instead, she felt only rightness. "No regrets?" Nightwind asked, reading her thoughts as he so often did. "None," she said firmly. "We can't change the past, but we can choose the future." Over the following days, their new life took shape. Sarah moved fully into Nightwind's dwelling, taking on the responsibilities of a chief's wife. It wasn't easy. There were protocols to learn, delicate political balances to navigate, skeptics to win over. But she faced each challenge with determination. Mrs. Miller and the Henderson girls were given the choice to leave, to be escorted to the nearest fort. The girls chose to stay, having formed bonds with Apache children their age. Mrs. Miller wavered but ultimately decided to remain as well. "Where would I go?" she said to Sarah one evening. "My husband is dead. I have no family back east. At least here, I have purpose. You've shown me that." Sarah continued her healing work with Wise Crow, becoming skilled enough that people sought her out specifically. She taught English to those who wanted to learn, understanding that knowledge of the white man's language might one day save lives. Nightwind supported her in everything, proud of his wife's growing influence. But they both knew this peace was temporary. The world beyond their valley was changing rapidly. Soldiers would come. Settlers would push further into Apache territory. Their love had built a bridge, but bridges could be burned from either side. One evening, as they sat outside their dwelling watching the sunset, Nightwind voiced what they both were thinking. "Hard times coming, our way of life ending. Question is, do we fight until last breath, or find new way?" "What do you want to do?" Sarah asked. "Want my people to survive. Want our children to have future. Maybe that means changing, learning, adapting." He pulled her close. "You showed me change doesn't mean death, can mean new life. Whatever comes, we face it together." Sarah said, "Apache and white, bound by love stronger than hate. Under same sky." Nightwind agreed, gesturing to the vast expanse above them where the first stars were appearing. All under same sky. They sat in comfortable silence, two people from different worlds who had found home in each other. The future was uncertain, fraught with danger and difficulty. But in this moment, they had each other, they had love, and they had hope. Sarah thought of her parents, hoping they would understand, even be proud. Their daughter had found love in the most unexpected place, had built something beautiful from tragedy. She touched the eagle feather still woven in her hair, no longer a stolen token but a symbol of belonging. "I love you," she said in Apache, the words flowing naturally now. "And I love you," Nightwind replied in English, still careful with the pronunciation. "My wife, my heart, my bridge to tomorrow." Under the same vast western sky that had witnessed so much blood and sorrow, Sarah and Nightwind held each other and dared to dream of a future where love might triumph over hate, where understanding might bridge the gap between peoples, where their children might walk freely in both worlds. It was, perhaps, an impossible dream, but then their love had been impossible too, and look how that had turned out. The stars wheeled overhead, ancient and eternal, blessing the chief and his unlikely bride as they faced their future together, hand in hand, heart to heart, under the same sky that watched over all. Thank you for listening to this Wild West love story. If you've made it this far, I'd love to know where in the world you're enjoying this tale. Please share in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe to From Wild West channel for more stories of love, adventure, and the untamed frontier. What did you think of Sarah and Nightwind's journey? Share your thoughts, and let's discuss this incredible romance that bridged two worlds. Until next time, partners.